One of the questions that I'm often asked is how quickly TapeTrack can be installed for evaluation purposes so a user can see whether the product is right for them. Now, what I've done is I've created myself a Windows virtual machine here. In this case, I'm using Windows Server 2016. It's the technical preview because the product hasn't been released yet. But this could be a Windows desktop, anything from XP through to Windows 10, or on the server side, 2008 server through to, in this case, the 2016 server. Now, the first thing that we're going to want to do is download the product. The product you want to download is the TapeTrack Framework server, which gives you your endpoint, which provides your database and security and things like that. So what we need to do here, fire up what used to be Internet Explorer, which is Microsoft's new Explorer. Not quite sure what it's called. Normally I use Chrome, but this is a vanilla install, so we'll use that. We go to mirror-us.tapetrack.com. If you're in Europe and you want a faster mirror, we also have a mirror there. We select Windows x64 here because we've got a 64-bit machine, and we select TapeTrack Framework Server. Edge is what it's called. It's not Internet Explorer anymore, it's Edge. So Edge will download the framework server install. As you can see, it's only 36 meg. If you've got a fast connection, it should take a few seconds to download. Once that's done, we click Run. We go through the standard, next. We're going to just do a vanilla install complete here. Click Install. User access control is going to ask us for permission. You can see here that we've got a verified publisher of Gazillabyte LLC. All of our software is digitally signed, so you should have no problems with Smart Screen complaining that it's an unauthorized product. Now you can see here the installer's just installed a help file. It started the service. The endpoint is now installed. That's it. No databases to install. No other middleware to install. It takes literally a few seconds. We click Finish, and now we install the TapeTrack server utilities, which are installed as part of this install. Now the server utilities just provide things like command line utilities for the server. You might not ever use them, you can always not install them, but it's always a good idea to have them there. And then we install the TapeTrack Tape Master interface. Okay, that's it. You've now installed the TapeTrack software. There's really not much more to it. With a download and the install, you're looking at probably about 2 minutes. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to log in and create ourselves a bit of an environment that we can play with. So we launch the TapeTrack Tape Master interface. Now, this can run on another machine. We've installed it here locally on the same machine, but this is a client-server architecture, so you could install this product standalone on your desktop, and you could connect into the server remotely. So what we're going to do is log in as the Tape Master user ID, which is the equivalent of root or administrator on a Unix machine. In fact, when you're authenticating against Active Directory, the Tape Master user ID will map to the Windows administrator password. And by default, the Tape Master user ID has a blank password. We can go in later and reset that. That's always a good idea. But when we log on for the first time, you'll see here that on the left-hand side, we have the license belonging to Acme Corp. What we're going to do is we're going to go and create ourselves a 14-day full license to the product. So we select Help and then Framework Server Licensing. We change the owner to your company name, and we give it a description of something like production. We go down to license limits, change the volume limit to 0, which means uncapped. We click Apply License Changes and Get Temporary License, and that will get you a 14-day temporary license automatically. We click OK. and we're done. If we go over to the window on the left-hand side and press F5, you'll see now that it says Gozillabyte LLC. If we now right-hand click here, we can create ourselves what's called a customer. Now, TapeTrack supports, through a single database, petitions, effectively petitions, which we call customers. And a customer might be, if you're a bank and you have data centers in 10 different locations, you would normally create a different customer for each of those locations. So we click Add Customer. We give the customer an identifier. It can be up to 1 to 4 digit identifier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this USCO. So United States, Colorado, and I'm going to say Denver Data Center. Is the description. So what you'll see now, I've got a customer defined. Now under a customer, we define media types. So if you have LTOs, everyone has LTOs these days. You might have 3592 cartridges if you've got a mainframe. So we right-hand click here and we say Add Media Type. I'm going to say LTO cartridge, and you'll see now that I've got my LTO cartridge and media type underneath my Denver data center, and I'm also going to put 3592 592. So I've created 2 media types here. Some people create things like USB disks, USB keys, or floppy disks, or whatever else they have hanging around. It's always a good idea to divide the media type or divide your tape library by kind of compatible media types. So you could have LTO 1, 2, and 3. We normally recommend that you put them all together in one media type. But where you've got incompatible types like, a USB key or an LTO cartridge, it's better, we find, to divide them by that. So if I now double click on my LTO cartridge, you'll see that over on the right hand side we have what we call our volume properties window. For now I'm just going to hide that. It gives us a little bit more real estate on the screen. Now what we need to do now is define what we call repositories. Now a repository is a location where a tape can be stored. So not a physical location down to a drawer, we can configure that later, but a conceptual location. So whether it's in the data center or whether it's in a tape library or at a disaster recovery location or offsite with your offsite vendor. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go down to repositories down the bottom here, and I can click Add, or I can just right-hand click here and I can say Add Repository. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself a offsite location. Now, depending on which offsite vendor you use, you might use Iron Mountain or Recall or one of the many independent players that are out there. In this example, I'm going to use Iron Mountain. So I've given it a repository ID of offsite, OFFS. I always recommend not using something like IRM if you're using Iron Mountain, because people change, and although the identifiers are something that's internal to TapeTrack, I always like to kind of keep it as non-specific as possible. So I've created a repository called offsite, given a description of Iron Mountain, and now I'm going to go over to options and I'm going to say type vault. And I'm also going to tell the system that this is an offsite location and that it's the primary offsite location. So when I save that, it'll ask me, do I want to make this the default location? And the default location is where new tapes by default will start their life cycle. So I don't want them to start at Iron Mountain, so I'm going to say no. And you'll see down the bottom here, I've got an Iron Mountain location with a safe door as an icon. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create myself a new one, and I'm going to call it library, and I'm going to call this my TS3500 library. And I'm going to go to options, and I'm going to select library. Now, tapes are going to start in this location. That's where they'll initially be written. So I am going to make this the default repository. So you'll see now that I've got my TS3500 tape library, and I've got my Iron Mountain location. You'll also probably have noticed that we get these library health warnings popping up on the right hand side. Once we start getting up and running, they'll automatically disappear. Alternatively, there's an option to disable them or disable selective messages. Now, I might also at this point create myself a racking location. Create myself a purchase order location. If I want to start tracking from the purchase order stage, ordered. I might also create myself a scratch rack. And finally, a disaster recovery location. As you can see, we can also create legal hold and a whole lot of other different locations, different location types, but we've got a good collection of them here. Now, at this point, we could start adding tapes into the system, and there's lots of different ways we can add them. We can add them with the barcode scanner. We can add them by just manually typing them in. We also have a utility for generating sequences of barcodes. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to drag and drop a file from my tape management system. So I've already created under documents here, I've created myself a TSM DRM table dump just by running a Tivoli storage manager command. Now, if I had another tape management system, I could run commands out of that, but this is one I had handy. So you'll see here, if I open it in something a bit more friendly than Notepad, we've got a list of tapes, a location, and so on. So the first thing I want to do is get those tapes into my system. So the simplest way to do that is just drag and drop them in. Now you'll see here that there's 967 tapes that I've just imported, and I've just done that by dragging and dropping them. Now if they have suffixes on them like L3s or L5s, we also have ways of easily being able to add those in. But as you can see, it's all quite simple, just being able to drag and drop a text file in there. Now, all of these tapes have been added into the system under the TS3500 tape library. Now, what would happen is, depending on how you're processing your tapes, if you're integrating with your tape management system, we can set TapeTrack up to automatically move tapes as they move within the system. But I want to keep this video quite short, so maybe I'll show you how to do that in another video. Now, what would happen is as your backup software does backups, it would select certain tapes, and if you're using Tivoli Storage Manager, its DRM component would select tapes. I'm just going to go and select a few manually here. And the automation itself would automatically move those tapes over to Iron Mountain. So what you can see now is that over on the left-hand side, the Denver data center has 967 tapes, of which 5 of them are moving from one location to another. And if we drill down, the LTO cartridges are the 5 cartridges that are moving. You can see them moving here, and you can also see that we keep a stopwatch on those tapes. So every 10 seconds that updates, so you can see these tapes were moved 28 seconds ago, and that stopwatch just keeps running until the tapes arrive at Iron Mountain, and we have an automatic interface that interfaces with Iron Mountain, that when the tapes arrive, they'll automatically be confirmed, and that stopwatch will stop. Now, what we find sometimes is that if you've got a large number of tapes moving back and forth, people can often forget, when tapes don't go where they're meant to go. So, a tape that's moving from the TS3500 tape library to Iron Mountain, if we're sending 5 of them, for some reason one of them might not be able to be sent. So what we want to do is we want to have an alert that happens if for some reason something falls through the cracks. Now the system won't stop working or it won't cancel out the request. It'll happily continue to recognize that tape as something that needs to go off site, but it will alert you. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the Iron Mountain location here, and under late threshold, by default it's 0, which means there is no threshold, but whenever we do our daily processing, we want to make sure that the tapes are in the Iron Mountain inventory within 600 minutes, which is 10 hours. If we save that, what you'll see now is that this tape has been moving for 1 minute and 58 seconds. It has 9 hours, 57 minutes and 52 seconds left, after which that tape will be flagged as being overdue. So to illustrate how that works, because we don't want to have to wait 10 hours, I'm going to go and change that to 3 minutes. So what we'll see here is that we now have 35 seconds left to go, and as time progresses, you will see that these tapes will all be marked as overdue at their location. Now, while we're waiting for that to happen, what TapeTrack does is TapeTrack records all of the activities that happen with each of your tapes, and each activity is assigned to a user ID so that we can see who's performed each operation. Now, before I show you that, we're almost at the 2-second mark. You'll see in a second, when we get to the 10-second interval, that all of these tapes have now gone red, and they've got an O flag, which means the tape is overdue at its target location. So at this point, we can hook into SNMP if you've got SNMP monitoring to let people know there's a problem. We can also escalate emails and things like that to just let people know, well, look, these tapes that were due at Iron Mountain are now overdue there. They haven't been scanned in. Now, if I double click on one of these tapes and go over to the history, you'll see that the tape was added at 6:50 and 27 seconds, and someone updated the target to the Iron Mountain location 1 minute later. If I double click on this entry, you'll see here that it will show you the exact time zone that the ad was done, the user ID, the name, which interface they were using, and whether it was in a case or something like that. What you can also do, which is kind of quite a nice feature as well, is that because we have all of this history of all of the tapes that amasses over time, we can rewind history and we can see where we were at a certain point in time. So if I right-hand click here and say View History Rewind, what you'll see is that at 6:56, this is where all of the tapes were. Now, if I go and grab this tape here and I manually confirm it over at Iron Mountain, which would normally happen automatically with our synchronization with them, and I go back and say View History Rewind, you'll see that this tape here is at Iron Mountain. All of the rest of them are in the TS3500 tape library. Now, if I want to see the difference between right now and a minute ago, I can say rewind between ranges, and I can say show me what it looked like at 6 o'clock and now. Well, at 6 o'clock we didn't have anything in the tape library, so none of these existed. So if I say 6:54, at 6:54 this tape here was in the tape library, but then at 6:56 it was over at Iron Mountain. So if I only want to see what's different, this is the delta between those points in time, between where the tapes were. So if you do ever have any problems, or you have auditors breathing down your neck, you can show them that you have this control to see the difference between this point in time and that point in time, which is a nice feature to have. Now, there's lots of other features that I can show you with the product. A lot of these features depend on how you specifically manage your tape library. But we're kind of at the 20-minute mark now, and at this point we've got the system installed. we've got it downloaded, installed, configured, and with data in it, and we're already up and using the product. So it's quite, I can quite confidently say that you could be up and running within 20 minutes. Now, I have a familiarity with the product, so I can get it done a lot quicker than you might, but even a new user should be up and running within an hour. All right. Thanks a lot for your time.